introduce yourself to the room and let them know who you are and what you do.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure being here. I am a chef. I trained under Gordon Ramsay, so I'm a classically trained chef, but have explored different avenues of hospitality ever since. And so at this stage in my life, I am a healthy cooking coach. I teach people how to cook healthy food quickly that also tastes delicious.
Excellent. All right, moving on. Andy, tell us who you are and what you do.
So my name's Andy Coley. I'm a leadership development trainer, coach and author of a book that came out 2 weeks ago called Leadership is a Skill as well, which I'm going to be giving away in the raffle.
Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony Courtney Brown, and I have a holistic clinic, and my aim in life is to help people regain and maintain their health holistically.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon. Lovely to be here, and some amazing speakers before, by the way. Thank you so much for what you've already shared. My name is Paul Avians. I'm a business strategist and scale-up expert. For the last 20 years, I've been helping male and female entrepreneurs to scale businesses to 7 figures in sales, then 7 figures in profits, and then 7 and 8 figure exits. So in the last 5 years, we've helped UK entrepreneurs exit for over £100 million of cash. That's money they put in their bank accounts for all their blood, sweat and years that they put into the business. And if you build a business, you'll know just how much hard work it takes. And at some point, you've got to take that money off the table. So what we help people do is level up as leaders, build a transformational team that frees you up. So I'm going to tell you now, you're 9 months away from being completely free in your business if you do it right now with the right team and the right tech. And then finally, to scale your sales to a point at which somebody wants to acquire you, which is a very nice place to be. So there you go.
Great stuff. Thanks, gents. A couple of other points before we start. So firstly, Gregory and Tony are both members. Gregory is responsible for those cappuccinos that Morella enjoys in the morning. He taught me how to make cappuccinos properly. And then finally, Tony. Tony received an award last night. Tony is our Global Man of the Year. So let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's go on to leadership then, shall we? So I have another story. Going back to that corporate career, I remember one of the big mergers we went through. The new CEO of the combined company was keen to get everyone on the same page. He was from the other firm, the other side of the merger, to my legacy side. And he came up with a phrase. He decided to soundbite it and send this thing out across voicemail to everyone. And it just caused a huge amount of noise. The soundbite was, "One firm, one team, be a leader." And I was like, what does that mean? What does that even mean? And it came up, there were loads of facetious comments on the back of it. Things like, "One firm, one team, every man for himself," for example. So, but the thing about it was, it sent this out without explaining it. What did he mean by it? So let's use that as a starting point. Leadership. What does leadership mean to you? Who wants to take that one? Who wants to start?
Go on, expert.
Andy, that is right up your street, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think leadership is mostly about setting the vision, setting the course. What's the direction you want to take the business, the company, the team? Whatever leadership means to you, by the way, it does not have to mean leading a corporate team. That could be leading your family. That could be leading your community. Where are you going with this, first of all? I think that's a big part of leadership. Because people often get leadership and management quite confused. I think leadership's about the setting the vision, setting the direction, and management's kind of about how do we get there, the people, the processes, the things that you need to automate and have in place in order to make sure that you're able to set that vision. So I think being a visionary leader is a big part of that, because if you don't have a vision, and you probably have all experienced times when you lose your purpose. If you lose your purpose, often that affects your sense of identity and can have a massive knock-on effect to your confidence. So your team need that vision, and they need you to have confidence in that vision so that they can get behind you to help you and themselves to achieve it.
Great, thanks very much, Andy. Now, moving on then. So in terms of leadership, leadership is something you can do for yourself. You don't have to have people that you're leading around. I'd love to hear from all the panelists on particular times when they've had to consciously step in to provide leadership and what that looked like.
Yeah, chef.
Chef.
Sure.
I've not always been a chef. I studied mechanical engineering. I was very lucky in life. I went to a very privileged school where we had a cadet force. So I was in a military setting, and then I went into the corporate world. I worked at Deloitte Consulting, so a global corporate firm, and then I worked for Gordon Ramsay, and so I've seen different styles of leadership, and I think, you know, as we grow in life, we try and find our way and the people that we look up to. And so I've had different mentors, and let's take Gordon Ramsay because he's, you know, what you see is what you get with him. And I always get asked, you know, what's he like to work with? And he does have a kind, funny, charming side, but then in work, he's a completely different person. And I think that's because of the mentors that have had an influence on him. Now, I realized very soon in my career as a chef that I didn't want to be like Gordon Ramsay. I didn't like his style of leadership. It worked, and you know, he's very successful.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, and so I think at different stages in my life, I have had to take on a leadership capacity, and you know, on a very small level as an engineer, we had team building exercises where each one of us had to take it in turns to be a leader, and I felt comfortable enough with that because for me it meant, well, if I'm in charge, then I can hopefully help us all be successful in this project. However, what I did notice is that sometimes some others had slightly better skills or natural abilities to lead the group, and I was very happy for them to lead as well because I saw something in them that inspired me. And so, you know, I've tried to take something from every stage of my life. And I think I've come to a stage where you see something, a quality in someone else. And I think a true leader is able to see the qualities in different people and bring together a team that work cohesively under them, under their vision. But that, a true leader, I think, from my own point of view of success, is someone that can identify the right people for that team to be successful.
Right.
I would pass it across, but I'll just comment on that one first. I think there are three elements that really get a team performing. First of all, they need to know what's expected of them. Then you need to be able to create the engagement within the team so they're behind you, and then gift them empowerment. And I can certainly think of times when I have probably set expectations and had some engagement, but have completely failed on the empowerment. You talk about sort of times when leadership's really worked, I can often think of times when I was getting it absolutely wrong. Micromanaging teams, not trusting them, avoiding conflict, because I was a massive avoider of conflict, sitting on the rescuer side of the drama triangle and doing stuff for people. So when you talk about, you know, think about examples of good leadership, the ones that often pop to my mind as the greatest learnings were the ones where I cocked it up completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
Cool. Do you want to go?
Right. In a previous life, I was a local authority housing director. Now, before that, I was a housing officer, and I didn't like the way the system worked. And I thought, I know, I'll get to the top of the greasy pole as soon as possible, and I'll change things. How naive was that? I ended up working for politicians. And of course, it doesn't matter if you're a director in title, you have to do what they say. So changing things and leading is quite a difficult thing to do in that environment, which was also probably part of what led to me having a complete breakdown and ending up in hospital, trying to please politicians, which you can't, ever. Then, finding myself taking 24 pills a day and in quite a terrible state mentally and physically, I realized that there was a better way to get better than taking pills. Hence, I came across holistic ways to get better and empowered myself to do that. Now, having done that and thinking, maybe there are other people who could benefit from this, I came up against another brick wall. You find that you have very powerful enemies when you start talking about things that you feel need to change, which you feel inside you, but then you think, oh, these people don't actually want that change. And then you think, shall I throw in the towel or shall I plough on? And my decision was to plough on, and that's what I will keep doing because I'm so passionate about people regaining their health through what Mother Earth gave us. We've heard quite a bit today about masculine and feminine power. Well, everybody's aware of what the menopause is. There's also something called the andropause, which is the male equivalent. But it's not talked about because we go into our caves and say, I'm all right, not talking. And that has a profound effect professionally and personally. So again, my message today is just take control of your own health. Your body knows best. Thank you.
I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction. Sure. So let's show of hands on a couple of things. Firstly, who here runs their own business? Cool. Keep your hand up if put your hand down if you're turning over less than 500,000. So if you turn over less than 500k, put it down. Cool. Okay, great. Keep it up if you turn over $1 million or more. Okay, cool. Congratulations, you're in the top 7% of entrepreneurs in the UK already. Well done. Keep it up if it's more than 2. Amazing. If it's more than 3, give these ladies an amazing round of applause, first of all, right? Right. You just for context, when you turn over £1 million in the UK, you're in the top 7%. As a female entrepreneur, once you go over 5 million in terms of revenue, not profit, if we talk EBIT, 1 million, you're in the top 0.02%. Right? Now, these are important data points to understand because sometimes you think, oh, I'll be successful when, and I'm like, I've got a client of mine, she's an incredible entrepreneur, incredible leadership, absolute example of what great leadership can be. But here's the thing. You have to be able to evolve as a leader. You are going to need to be one type of leader to get the business to $1 million. You're going to need to be a different type of leader to get it from 1 to 5. You're going to need to be a different one to go from 5 to 10. And you've got to understand that you need different teams around you at each of the levels. Most people don't realize this. And then as a leader, you've got to understand yourself. So 3 things you've got to understand. Number 1 is who you are naturally. Okay? Like, here's the thing. Elon Musk, whether you like him or he's got a different leadership style to Gordon Ramsay, different to me, different to Branson. Doesn't mean you can't be successful, but you do need to understand your own leadership style. We use a profiling tool that I profile everybody we work with because you're going to need to build a different team depending on what your unique talent is and your unique ability. So number 1, you got to figure out who you are and figure out who you need around you to grow faster. Because the biggest mistake most entrepreneurs make is they try and do everything when they're designed to do 1 or 2 things brilliantly and everything else they should get the hell away from. Right? Right? True? Yeah? Right? The challenge is we all have been sold the biggest lie out there, which is in order to be successful, you have to be good at everything. It's a big lie, and it keeps most people stuck, or it kept me stuck for years, right? In my company, I have 3 different companies, and they're all run by women. In fact, sometimes around the boardroom table, I'm the only man, right? All right? And it's a cool decision because, yeah, but it's not because they're female, it's because they're great at what they do. Right? It's not because it's about who's the right person. It's like if you as a leader, the first thing you should invest is in yourself, be in this room, exactly that. Second thing is understand yourself and then understand who you need to start recruiting around you. And you're going to need different things, right? Up to £1 million, you're going to need to have one set of leadership skills. Start to go up, you're going to need to move up. A client of mine, when I started coaching her, she was £5 million business. She went to 0 during COVID. You want to talk about leadership at that point, you've got to be a very different leader then versus a £5 million organisation to survive that. That's all about hold the vision, keep the faith. There's 2 things I'd have you write down. Is go around and stick that on your wall. Hold the vision, keep the faith. Because you have to hold the vision when everyone else can't see it, and you have to keep the faith when everyone else loses it. Period. Okay? That business bounced back 2 years after COVID, came back, did 7 million. That's one thing, cool, congratulations. Now we're going to play a bigger game. So now you have to think differently as a leader and ask the question, what if we could fill in blank? She was a £7 million business. What's the vision? £25 million, biggest privately held company in her sector, which is education. So guess what we did? I said, well, what about if we buy the biggest competitor? She was like, can we do that? Is that allowed? I was like, what if we could? So here's the thing. 12 months later, they acquired their biggest competitor that was twice their size. Now that business is an £18 million business, employing 400 people. Think you've got to change as a leader to do that? Heck yes. Need to have the ability to understand what seat you're sat in, when it is, the mindset challenges, by the way, that come up. Think about that, by the way. By the way, the money stuff that comes up when you're suddenly dealing with a business turning over nearly 20 million is completely different to the business money issues you have turning over 1 million. So you've got to realize that leadership is actually about evolving. Evolving who you are, the skills you have, and the people you have around you. And here's the thing. Most people who start the journey with you will not go the distance. You're going to need to realize that some of the hardest decisions are letting go of people who you've outgrown and the business has outgrown. How many get that? Say yes? Right? And it's one of the hardest things leaders have to come to terms with, because they're like, yeah, but they've been great. They've been loyal. I've loved them. They've been with me all the way. Yeah, but they're now holding you back. And it's really hard, that part. And that leadership is being able to confront the reality and not tell yourself what you want to hear. It's the ability to deal with the reality while still holding the vision, keep the faith.
Thanks very much, Paul. Right. There's a few things in there I'd like to explore in more detail, but I heard the word empower or empowering come up from a couple of people, from Andy and from Tony. And thinking about the leadership styles and so on, and also going back to Deborah's points around the shadow masculine. The shadow masculine is not an empowering space. So what I'd like to explore more in more detail is that idea of empowerment and empowering those around you, and how that fits into leadership and leadership styles. So who's got comments on the idea of empowering and the skill sets needed for that and how that can work?
I'll start.
Thanks.
Yeah, and just on a very simple point of cooking, I think cooking is a very level playing field, because we all need to eat, and it's a skill that you can learn. And, again, taking reference to Gordon Ramsay, his style was, no, my way is the only way, and you will do it my way or you're out. And that created a certain level of excellence, and it also sped up the learning. My approach, though, is that different people respond to different management styles, and when you identify what that person responds to better, you get the best out of them. And so some people respond better to praise and encouragement, and others respond better to challenge and pressure. And certainly in a cooking environment, I think that is quite important, because you'll get more out of them and you'll get a longer bandwidth, before they quit. And there's a high turnover rate in my industry because it's exhausting. But when you see that you've hit the note right with someone, their physiology, their emotion changes completely. And in cooking, the results are instant, because you learn how to cut something better, it tastes better, you see the results instantly, and that's incredibly satisfying. And I've worked with men and women and tried different styles with both, and it's always really rewarding to get that result instantly.
What's Gordon Ramsay's love language, or I wonder? Because you were talking, yes, yeah, gifts, stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Gifts.
Because that's immediately what came into my head when you were talking about acts of service or words of affirmation or praise or whatever it happens to be. And I think that can equally apply to workplace as much as it can into your personal relationships as well. I think for me, one of the biggest areas is emotional intelligence. Yeah, and that for me, that sort of breaks down into 4 main areas of self-awareness. Are you aware of what's going on for you right now? How do, as many of the speakers up here, those thoughts have an effect on your feelings that start to come out through the things that you're doing or not doing? So are you aware of it? What happened just before I felt that feeling? And so becoming more aware, increasing that amount of time between the stimulus of something happening and your response. And therefore the next part is that self-regulation. How do I show up with being happy about something versus what do I do with the anger and the frustration and the annoyance about what somebody has or hasn't done? And then social skills and the ability to build good relationships. I think all those 4 elements of emotional intelligence are a really key part of learning about yourself in order then to help to learn about other people. And I think the one aspect that, for me, emotional intelligence really rocks into when it comes to your leadership side is looking at the shadow. What's the shadow you cast upon the team? Because often their behaviours and their results and everything they are achieving or not achieving, what's that say about the way that maybe you are having an impact upon that? Because what's the shadow you're casting upon that set of results as well?
the so-called leaders who there are in the world, are they of one type or are they different? Because there are very different types of leadership. One, at one particular extreme, is all about ego. Somebody who just wants to be in charge, wants the accolades, wants the status. The other end of the spectrum, there are people who have a vision which is much bigger than themselves, and they want to leave a legacy. You may have heard the phrase led by donkeys. Well, again, when we look around the world and the different leadership styles that there are, maybe there are some donkeys who are leading us. I make no comment as to who that might be or which people might be involved in that. Empowerment is about giving people choice. It's never a one-size-fits-all. So, for instance, with regard to health, if you come across 3 people who each have a headache and you give them all an aspirin, there'll be a different outcome. One will say, I've got better. The other one will say, actually, I don't feel so good. Another one will say, didn't make any difference. And so, as a leader, your role is to give the options to people. And because, as Gregory was saying, everybody's different, it's never a one-size-fits-all. So if you give people the options or the means to find out themselves so that they can make their choice, that is what I believe constitutes a level of empowerment.
Nice. Okay, I'll give you some practical stuff that you can do that I do with my team that works really well. Here's one. Work out the amount of money they can spend to solve any issue they come across without asking you. Right? So if it's £100, they don't have to check with you to fix the problem. Because honestly, it's not worth my time by the time they've talked to me to talk to them to sort the problem. I'm like, 100 quid, just fix it. 9 times out of 10, they already know what to do anyway. So that's one. So give them an amount. By the way, the bigger the organisation gets, the higher that number will get. So like my team, some of my team, the directors, they can spend £500 to £1,000 without checking with me to solve any issue at all they come across with a customer. Now, if it's the same issue twice, we're going to have a conversation and understand what's going on. But if it's the first time, they'll tell me at the weekly team huddles. That's one. 2 is empower people by having really clear roles and goals. Most people are not 100% clear about what it is they're expected to do, what good looks like, and what they're allowed to make decisions on. So if you get really clear about that in the roles and goals piece, and honestly revisit it at least twice a year, go back to them and go, let's just revisit your role and goal, because the chances are if you're growing, it's shifted. Right, and you might need to re-update it. The third thing is make documents and processes that people can follow that show them what good it, like if they're lost, they can go back to the system, not have to come to you. Then they feel empowered to self-police, self-learn, self-educate and go, oh, great, I'll go watch the video on how to do that rather than come and ask you. So it's 3 things always, right? It's yes, give them responsibility with guidelines of what they can spend. 2, build the right tech and systems so that they can learn to solve things as they go without always having come to you. And thirdly, just honestly, the more you just allow people to successfully fail. So if you look at the research done by Google about high-performing teams, they said the most important thing out of everything was psychological safety. Psychological safety, right? And yet everyone goes, well, what's that? And I'm like, it means you're okay with other people screwing up. Because you do it too, by the way. If you're an entrepreneur, you mess up probably more than they do, let's be honest, right? It's just we tend to fix it faster. So like, the reality is that people are going to mess up. I say to all my team, I don't mind if you mess up trying to do, it's the difference between intention and impact. If the intention is pure, if the impact didn't work out quite how we thought it was, then let's learn, let's review, let's figure out what did we learn from that, and let's update process or systems and learn from it, right? That's a valuable lesson, isn't it? Right? The intention was pure, though. As long as the intention's coming from a good heart and we wanted to serve, wanted to do the best thing, if the outcome didn't quite go our way, then that's just the way it rolls sometimes. And we learn from it and we move forward. But if people feel like they can't fail without being criticized, condemned, or hauled over the coals in front of other people, they won't take risks. They won't solve things. They won't fix things and innovate things that they can see need fixing because they'll be worried about the fear of what you may or may not do. So whatever you do, be consistent with how you show up, right? That's the other thing that means people feel empowered, is your response is consistent today, next week, next month, which is hard, right? You've got to understand your self-profile first in terms of what's going to trigger you.
Great, thanks, Paul. One thing to add to that is I was very lucky that I worked for 2 individuals for an extended period of time, and I didn't realise quite how exceptional they were within a corporate world until after they both left, and they left within about a year of each other. And they were exceptional for 2 things, one of which speaks to what you've just described. I could go into their offices and say, I've got this idea. We'd kick the idea around. They would challenge me, not in a critical way, but have you thought about this? What if? Blah, 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 blah. And usually, or quite often, we'd walk out of there going, yeah, okay, I'm happy, do it. Try and make it successful, but if you don't, fail fast. And the way I would describe them is they were willing to play to win. They were willing to take a chance. Where they were exceptional within this corporate world, once they'd left, I would do the same thing with everyone I worked for after that. And it would always be, oh, this could go wrong. Oh, it'll look really bad if that happens. And it was not focusing on what the outcome we were shooting for was, but all the stuff that could go wrong. And quite often it was, no, I don't want to take that risk. They were playing not to win, which is very different. Sorry, playing not to lose, which is very different from playing to win. Anyway, also, I'm aware that we've got a panel of men sitting in front of a room that's predominantly women talking about leadership. So I'm going to throw in a bomb now to the guys. I didn't warn you I was going to be doing this, but I also want it to be...
Sure in London, that's the right word. Genuinely.
Sorry. Metaphorical bomb. Metaphorical bomb. And what I'm looking for, actually, is I'm looking for interaction. I'm looking for things coming back from you as the audience as well. So this is a slightly loaded question. And part of the reason for doing this was also making some observations about the way some of my bosses, former bosses or managers showed up at work in these corporate roles. And I'm not asking for your examples, but unless it's examples that you're happy to share, and it may be examples of other people showing up. But where do you think men fall short when it comes to leadership, when it comes to having diverse teams, and in particular working with women? Ooh.
Where do men fall short?
Where do men most often fall short?
In positions of leadership when there's a diverse team specifically?
Yes, and the reason for asking that is, I remember seeing people showing up and thinking there was nothing wrong with what they were doing until I got involved in the diversity agenda. And suddenly you'd hear people people saying, oh, well, this happened. And you're going, well, that seems normal. But then you realize it's normal to you as a man. And then actually what this person is saying was, well, that impacted me as a woman in a negative way, but it was just completely incomprehensible to me as a man until it was mentioned. So that's an example for me. And I can give one specific example was a guy he was very keen on football. He would very often say, right, we're going to go out to the bar to watch a Champions League match after work. A, that's a very male thing to do, but B, he would only invite male members of the team. So he was excluding all the women that were in the team from going out to what he would suggest was a non-work thing, but obviously it's with work people, work would be discussed, bonds would be formed, and he was actually creating division within the team without even realizing it.
You answering with it?
Well, I'll answer it as best I can. I don't have a ton of experience in managing diverse teams, but I would take it down to a totally personal level and relationships, which we've all got some experience with, and I think in a relationship setting, man and a woman, there needs to be a certain amount of collaboration and seeing things from the other person's point of view, and something that I learned from my past relationships is empathy. I didn't really fully understand empathy until I learned it from my ex, and so I think there's a lot of learning that can be had. But then in terms of the activities, or rather the projects that we undertake together, we each, again, bring something different to the table. And as a man, often we're more willing to take risks, and women may be asking questions, well, what if, and challenge us. And maybe this applies to a business setting where one person is more willing to take a risk because they think it would be better for the relationship. It might be fun. It might be a learning process. You might have a negative experience, but then learn from it. And so, I would say work to each other's strengths and try to work to those strengths in those relationships.
Great, sir. Okay, Andy.
I think start to become a bit more aware of your biases. white middle class man raised in a right middle class family down in Portsmouth in an area where there was very little diversity. And everyday sexism was all over the Sunday films, Carry On Camping and all those kind of things. They were normal shows. If you haven't watched that yet, don't bother. Where I watch films back now from the 80s and think, oh my God, I couldn't stand watching that. I mean, I was sat yesterday morning on the sofa with my 7-year-old, explaining to her why in the Barbie movie they were making reference to the woman being questioned about being a doctor. Like for her, women are doctors. But I had to explain why that joke was in the film, because that wasn't a normal thing. And so starting to become aware of your bias is really important. I'm much more aware of my racial bias moving up to London. Seeing families from lots of different religions, lots of different skin colours, getting used to mixed race couples and going, oh, there's a white woman with black kids. And it's like, oh, and I'm noticing those things inside my head. Judith, you called us out earlier, where there's 3 men stood around.
None of you asked my name.
Yeah.
Paid no attention to me. It was like, what are you doing
Yeah.
here? I thought, wow.
And we need women like Judith to call those things out. So why didn't 3 men who were stood together having a conversation just bring Judith into that conversation, because she was stood there next to us waiting to be brought in? And we need people to call us out on the stuff that happens without necessarily us being aware of it or meaning anything from it. But it's the sort of stuff where it's really important that you have those people in your life that can call stuff out. I live with an amazing, fairly radical feminist now, who's a hypnobirthing teacher and a doula and a midwife, and she's taught me so much about what was probably my very narcissistic, biased past. And I am constantly exploring that. So for people like Judith, thank you so much for calling that out.
I just wanted to say, Andy, thank you for talking about biases and understanding them better. But please take a step further than waiting for somebody to call them out to you. Take responsibility and find out for yourself what those biases are so that you can be informed. I really encourage men to take that initiative rather than be called out.
Yeah, and I've been spending a lot of time with my Islamic friends at the moment, finding out much more about Ramadan, and my biases around a religion, that constantly gets pushed with a very biased agenda. So where I can and what I do, I'm doing my best to do that, to make sure that for my children and for myself and for the world, we can start to improve some of those areas. So thank you.
I think one of the things that you alluded to, I don't know if any of you have ever seen a program called It Was All Right in the 80s, where they showed sort of so-called comedy programs from the 80s in the way that, it's just full of everyday sexism, racism, and every other ism you can think of. Yeah. With regard to leading diverse teams, something that Ian often raises in Global Men is that men are fixers. And so when a problem is presented, instead of asking for everybody's opinion, okay, let's fix it, rather than looking at it from every angle. And I think that that's something that, once you've raised it, I can't unsee that. So something I always try and do. The other thing is that once I went on a peculiar thing, it's called a man's weekend. And went along to this place, and we all got into this teepee type thing, and there were some rules. You're not allowed to talk about women, sport, or booze. And no booze was allowed either. And so the whole weekend was examining your role as a man in society, and what was it that you were going to do, and how were you going to help improve society rather than continue to wreck it. And I think that was just such a profound experience, which made me, and I think all the other guys as well, think about, okay, what the hell am I doing, without looking at every aspect. And I think it's certainly made me listen more to what people are saying from whatever background they have and trying to learn from it.
I think, for me, first of all, I was very fortunate to speak on another panel in front of an amazing room of female entrepreneurs, and I said, first of all, we're not the enemy. We're trying to grow and get better, right? Every year I coach, the more people I coach, the more I learn about myself and the things I go, oh, that's interesting. I'm working with 2 amazing guys from Dubai and Ramadan. Yeah, learned tons about it, right? Because it's like, oh, okay, didn't know about that. And I think we have to allow people to be on a permission of growth, a journey of like, I didn't know about that, but I'm on a journey to get better. I also think the thing I've really learned a lot about diverse teams is that, again, this is where I've always taught that you separate the person from the profile. Okay, it's not a man, it's not a woman, it's a certain type of profile. So there are loads of profiling tools on the market. That's fine. The ones we use is one called Contribution Compass. But if I understand somebody on my team is a high sustaining energy person, right? They're going to therefore be slow to make decisions. They add value to the team in different ways. They're going to get stressed if I want to move too fast. So this is about understanding the people that you work with and your preferred style of operating, and they're learning how to change how you operate to better serve people depending on their style. And for me, when I've just been able to shift from, it's not about the person, it's about the profile, right? Everyone in here has got a different profile, and it's got nothing to do with skin tone, age, color, right? We have ways that we operate and work for us, and it's about having a level of awareness of when that's a strength and when it's an Achilles heel. Because there are certain parts of my profile that are fundamentally brilliant at getting certain things achieved. They're a nightmare when it comes to other decision-making processes where I am better not to be in the room. But unless my team knows that as well, they don't know when to turn around to me. And I've always said to my team, the fundamental rule I've given them is like, any one of you can tell me to sod off at any point and not be worried about it. It's like, if I'm not adding value in this room, tell me to leave, and I'll go do something else more constructive right now, and you guys solve it. Because there are times when you need my energy and my creativity and the things that I do in my profile, and there are times when that's actually not helpful to what you're trying to achieve. And we have to be able to have that conversation. We don't need your profile in the room right now. It's not you, it's profile, right? And I think when you can start to see beyond a person and understand who they are and how they function, you see value in people in a very different way. Certainly for me, I've had a tremendous learning. When I started coaching 20 years ago, I didn't have kids. I didn't have my sons. Jonathan's got high-level autism stuff. And suddenly when it's like all these people on Instagram stuff drive me insane. Oh, you need to do 18-hour days. You need to do this. You need to do that. It's like, A, shut up. B, that's ridiculous, because if you've got family, kids, you've got to juggle. That's the most destructive piece of advice you can give everybody. And thirdly, I'm a human being with relationships, a wife with brain injury, a son with autism, and I've got to balance all of that stuff at the same time as running a business and looking after customers. And I think sometimes it's, from a leadership standpoint, we have to meet people where they're at on their journey and not judge them for where they're at. They're just at where they're at. Like the client I was telling you about, the number of calls we would have when she's buying this £15 million business, we've got a diverse team we're trying to take on. She's got 2 kids one going through A-levels, one going through GCSEs. Like, if you don't think that's going to stress the hell out of her, you're missing the point of what she's dealing with as a leader. And all of that stuff makes up her world as a leader. And I think we have to be very careful about what's your world and my world. And we all have a different map of the world when we come to any conversation, right? My map of the world is going to be based on being adopted, going through all the struggles I've gone through. It's going to be different to your map of the world. The skill is, can we both stand in the same place, look at the maps and look for where there's similarity in the map, not look for where there's difference. That's the skill I really think you want to foster in a team. Because when you go, hang on a second, there's a beach ball in the middle of this meeting, you're looking at it and it's red, I'm looking at it and it's blue, you're looking at it and it's green, and you're looking at it as yellow. None of us are wrong. We're just all stood at a different point on the beach ball. And unless we can, for me, that's when you really start to go, all right, cool. I hire the best person for the job, whether that's in the UK, overseas. I'm looking for the best talent. However that talent shows up, that's the wrapper that it comes in, right? It's like, I'm looking for talent. But if you realize that sometimes you're going to be having a conversation with someone who stood on the opposite side of the beach ball of you, and you can violently disagree, but you're actually looking at the same thing. You ever had that conversation? Like, my wife and I do that all the time, because she's the opposite side of the profile to me, and I'll be saying something, and she'll be going, no, that's not how it is, right? I mean, even the two of us have learned we have roles and responsibilities in the family, and it was the best thing we ever did was to write them down. Because there's stuff I should not be allowed to do in the house. I'm terrible at it, right? Like, I am not a DIY, I'm a GSI person, get someone in. So it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, you got to be really clear on roles and goals. And I think fundamentally it's like, be committed to learning how to have more empathy as a leader with other people. And I think your team dynamics will get better as a result. But your team will never outgrow you. So, there you go.
Great stuff. Thanks ever so much, Paul. So, gentlemen, thank you ever so much. Paul, Tony, Andy, Gregory, thanks for being on this panel.